The most beautiful thing I've ever seen was how we opened our hearts and minds at the dawn of humanity's awakening. It started in the small, quiet moments. The people chose, by some inner urging, to turn off the outside voices that chased them into frantic circles. Momentarily, they stepped away from the drama, trauma, fear, and jealousy of their lives. They took a walk in the woods, or listened to the ocean waves, or wrote in a journal. They stopped running long enough to hear what was waiting for them in the silence. The soul instructions to give up the thing they thought they most needed. The alcoholic thinks he needs the alcohol, for example, and the codependent thinks she needs the alcoholic. People were asked to give up what they thought they needed to be okay, which was also the thing that made them sick. For some, it was eating processed foods or watching the news. For others, it was their corporate job or academic prestige or material belongings or career ambition. For others, it was their reputation, religious community, or social identity. And yet for others, it was a relationship around which they had built their life. For each person, giving up this thing felt like too much to ask. The call came to each person in a different way, yet somehow it was all the same. They were all asked to choose freedom over familiarity, truth over convenience, and integrity over approval. Upon hearing the call, the sharp knife of fear plunged into their minds. The people thought, "Oh no, I cannot do that. It is impossible." Yet then they looked around and, sure enough, someone had already done it. Someone had already moved out of a 12-room house to an off-grid tiny home. Someone had already left the cult. Someone had already healed the incurable illness. Someone had already taught themselves to garden and raise chickens. Someone had already healed the same type of trauma. Because others had freed themselves in these different ways, there were no excuses. That was the scary part of opening one's eyes. Even though hearts balked, many people were brave enough to accept the call. They realized the thing they most feared giving up was the thing standing in the way of them and their healing. To put it another way, it was standing between them and God. And so the people learned to let go of that which was making them sick, or small, or suppressed. They realized, all along, they had been holding on to things which made their lives feel too tight, as if there was a deficiency of oxygen, or of truth. As the people got closer to truth in their own lives, they got closer to the truth in the world. They looked down at their hands and feet and saw the puppet strings tied there. They noticed how their emotions and thoughts moved at the tug of a string, the flip of a TV channel, or a news headline. With one tug, rage ignited between friends. With another tug, families tore apart. With a few more careful tugs, riots and wars erupted. Some people got deliciously high on the outrage. They blamed their problems on the wrong president, their troubled childhoods, their past lovers, or the opposite sex. They blamed and blamed until they were blue in the face and then collapsed in exhaustion. Yet others wanted sobriety instead of the emotional hit. They looked at those strings and wondered, how did these get here? Who pulls these strings? They started to follow the strings back to the source, a journey that led them into darkness beyond anything they could have imagined, beyond any horror movie or storybook villain. With sadness, They tell you that some people caught a glimpse of the darkness and then turned away. They said, "It is too much. I can't handle knowing the truth. I can't survive this." You might think the word for this is cowardice. And yes, it is cowardly, but most of all, it is ignorance, a lack of wisdom. Those people believed the darkness was, impossibly, greater than love. Others determinedly went to the source of those puppet strings, and they cut them out at the roots. This had to happen at a spiritual level. They chose freedom at extraordinarily high costs when the stakes appeared impossible. Many of them lived quiet lives you would never know about, and yet they touched the world with such legendary and contagious bravery. During this time, the people helped each other. Men and women healed together, whether as friends or spouses or lovers, realizing that the medicine one offered fit the other's wounds. Weak men grew strong, clear-sighted, and honorable. Embittered women grew tender, intuitive, and open-hearted. Women stopped butchering, plasticizing, medicating, and starving their bodies, and instead treasured their bodies as lifelong soulmates. People began to reconnect with the old ways, to their ancestors' wisdom and self-reliance. Many people moved to the country and started gardens. The pale children came out from behind computer screens to romp in the sunshine and the rich dirt. Families grew stronger and learned, sometimes for the first time, how to truly love and communicate with each other. People left the cold, soulless halls of Western medicine in droves, a great exodus, and found better living through nature instead of chemistry. In everything, the people started to move towards purity. By this, I mean that their bodies and minds and hearts were made purer. Food and connection and conversation and sexual relationships became purer. There were transition periods that required an unfathomable amount of patience, fortitude, and self-discipline. Imagine the withdrawal period a drug addict endures. The people had to grieve what they gave up, even if what they gave up had made them sick and addicted and unhappy. In this purifying process, temptation whispered like a devil on the shoulder. It said, "You should just give in. Go back to your old habits." Yet the voice of the heart whispered, "I cannot go back, for I am not that person anymore. I will take the unfamiliar future over the familiar past." The people didn't make this choice through external moral obligation. They weren't driven by unquestioned religious dogma, cultural norms, or familial pressure. Instead, they were drawn by an internal desire that said, "I will choose the things that bring me closer to God, or I will go without." Also beautiful was the way that the divisions between us and them dissolved. The people realized those who they feared most and hated most offered them some kind of truth and self-insight, and therefore some kind of healing. The people gained enough emotional maturity to realize, in some way, they shared the negative characteristics as the group they despised. They busied themselves with taking logs out of their own eyes and stopped noticing the specks in their neighbor's eye. Some people eventually adopted the perspectives of those they once blamed for ruining the world. That's when they realized they had fundamentally misunderstood and mislabeled those they once hated. This led to uncomfortable but necessary identity crises. Fortunately, the people learned to laugh heartily at themselves, which helped the process immensely. This process, by the way, is called healing. There were some, however, who clenched their eyes shut greedily, unwilling to heal. I do not want my life to become unfamiliar to me, they said, so I will continue to hold others responsible for the troubles in my life. These people, who chose blindness over reality, were not really happy. And yet that is what they wanted, and the rest of us learned to let them be. It is a form of self-destruction to try to free someone who doesn't want to be free. It can even be a suicide mission. So the wise people stayed in their own lanes, creating for themselves lives of freedom. Should the blind ever open their eyes, they would see the possibilities. This is called love. The word apocalypse means a revealing. The darkness revealed to us what love was not, what truth was not, and what freedom was not. The people then said to the darkness, "Thank you. I couldn't have done it without you. With your help, I remembered who I am. I learned what love and truth and freedom really are. I learned those things are actually the same." The darkness, which had once hidden in the hearts and minds of the people, was hidden no longer and lost its power. Oh, the dawn of this awakening was a beautiful thing to see. I wouldn't have missed it for the world.